Welcome back to the deep dive. Day 30 already.
It has been quite a journey.
It really has.
30 days, wow.
And for this last day, instead of looking at a specific compound, we're gonna sort of step back and look at the whole experience of this deep dive, and reflect on the whole thing a little bit. And I think it's interesting how we started, right? We started with the sort of basic fundamental building blocks.
Yeah.
We talked about FDA pathways,
Yeah.
ICH guidelines, quality by design, risk management. And we've sort of returned to those over and over again as we've gone through this deep dive.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, what are your sort of reflections on that? I know we did that very deliberately. We wanted to kind of introduce those early on. And then as we went into all this fascinating research and all these different compounds, we kind of always brought it back to that.
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think it was a really good strategy, right? The spiral learning that we've talked about. Because I think if we had tried to jump into, let's say, the intricacies of the PIGA gene mutation assay or, response surface methodology without first laying the groundwork,
Right.
it would have been much harder to grasp those concepts, right? You kind of have to have that foundation.
It would have been overwhelming.
It would have been totally overwhelming. So, revisiting those core ideas each time, it was after we had explored a new facet of psychedelic science. And so, we had this richer context to apply those concepts to. And
Right.
I think that really reinforced the understanding. It wasn't just theoretical anymore. I was like, oh, okay, now I see how this applies to the actual development of MDMA-assisted therapy or psilocybin research or whatever it may be.
Yeah, exactly. I remember even just, on day one, when we were kind of laying all that groundwork, like I said, it was kind of overwhelming at first, but then each time we circled back, it's like, oh, okay, I see how this connects to what we were just talking about, It helped to make those connections.
Yeah, and I think it also highlights, one of the key distinctions between the realm of FDA-approved therapeutics and then just the wild west of unregulated products that are out there, right? I mean, it really is the difference between those rigorous standards, those layers of testing and oversight that ultimately ensure patient safety and provide that framework for responsible innovation.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like the molecule itself is just, it's one piece of the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
It's all of this ecosystem that surrounds it and how you develop it and how you test it and how you administer it and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, those, and again, those regulations and guidelines might not be as flashy as the latest, brain imaging study or clinical trial results, but they're the bedrock, right? They're what enables that responsible drug development to occur. They're what ensure that we're, proceeding with caution and really, prioritizing safety and efficacy above all else.
Right, yeah. Okay, so that was a good strategy, the spiral learning.
I think so.
Yeah. But I guess, how does that sort of translate to, how do we actually think about these therapies and the potential impact they can have on society, on the way we approach mental health care, on all those big questions, like how do we connect those dots? How do we bridge that gap between those core concepts that we talked about in the nitty-gritty of the science and the actual real world implications?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question, right? But I think one way to think about it is that we're potentially on the cusp of a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Right? For decades, the focus in mental health care has been primarily on symptom management. Okay, you're depressed, let's try to alleviate the symptoms of depression. You're anxious, let's try to manage that anxiety. But these new therapies offer the possibility of something more.
Right.
Right. They offer the possibility of facilitating profound personal growth and healing, right? Addressing the underlying root causes of suffering.
Yeah, it's like not just putting a Band-Aid on it, but actually getting to the root of the problem.
Exactly. It's like if you have a leaky faucet, you could just keep mopping up the water.
Yeah.
Or you could actually fix the leak,
Right.
And that's what these therapies have the potential to do. They have the potential to go beyond just symptom management and actually address the underlying causes of suffering.
Yeah. Okay. But that's exciting. It's also really kind of, it's uncharted territory in a lot of ways, right? How do we integrate these therapies into existing healthcare systems? How do we do this responsibly? How do we do this ethically? It just seems like there's so much to consider.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? It's It's one that demands ongoing dialogue and collaboration and a willingness to adapt and to really think outside the box. It's not, we can't just shoehorn these therapies into existing frameworks. We need to create new frameworks. We need scientists, clinicians, regulators, policymakers, even patients themselves to all come together and really have a conversation, a dialogue about how to shape this field, how to make this happen in a way that is beneficial and not harmful.
So it's not just about the research, it's about the whole infrastructure.
The whole infrastructure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we need to think about things like access, right? Affordability. How are these therapies going to be made available to everyone who needs them?
Yeah.
We need to think about training for therapists, right? Who's going to be administering these therapies?
Right.
What kind of training do they need? Public education to dispel misinformation and stigma. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done, but it's exciting work, right? Because we have this opportunity to really create something new, to create a system that is more effective, that is more compassionate, that is more holistic. And that's what I find so inspiring about this field.
So, yeah, okay, so we kind of started with these foundational concepts, we've circled back to them over and over again. And it's kind of like those concepts are the sort of the groundwork for everything else. But then it sort of like radiates outwards into all these other areas, like you're saying, the training, the access, the affordability, the public perception, the ethics. I mean, it's really a vast landscape.
It is. And it's one that we all have a role to play in shaping, right? It's
Right.
not just up to the scientists or the clinicians. It's up to all of us to educate ourselves, to engage in these conversations and to advocate for responsible, research and development and implementation of these therapies.
Yeah. And I guess for those of us, working in the pharmaceutical industry, the biotechnology industry, like, I mean, that's a big responsibility.
It is.
I kind of feel like, we're on the front lines in a lot of ways. Like, we're the ones who are actually developing these therapies, who are, conducting the research, who are trying to bring these to market. And so it really feels like we have a special responsibility to get it right.
We do. And to stay informed, right?
Yeah.
To really engage with the evolving regulatory landscape and to be advocates.
That's right.
To advocate for responsible research and development and to make sure that we're doing this in a way that is ethical and sustainable and that ultimately benefits, humanity as a whole.
Right. Oh, okay. So for people who are, working in this field, what are some ways that they can, kind of stay ahead of the curve? What are some ways they can really actively participate in shaping this landscape?
Well, I mean, I think first and foremost, continuous learning is key. This deep dive, this has been great. It's been a fantastic overview, but it's really just scratched the surface, right? I mean, there's so much more out there.
Right.
So many incredible resources, research articles, industry conferences, online forums. There are so many ways to stay up to date on the latest developments in this field, and it's on us to be proactive, right? To seek out that information, to not just wait for it to come to us, but to really be actively engaged in the learning process.
Right. It's not just about reading the latest articles.
Yeah.
It's about, going to conferences, talking to people, engaging in those discussions and really, challenging your own assumptions and asking questions. I think that's really important. Just don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo, to think outside the box, because that's how innovation happens, right?
Okay.
It's by asking questions, by not being afraid to rock the boat a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the future of cannabinoid and psychedelic therapies, it hinges on that collective effort.
Right.
We need to be active participants, not passive observers. We need to be the ones who are pushing the boundaries, who are driving this field forward. And that requires, a certain level of courage and a willingness to take risks and to be uncomfortable sometimes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I think it's easy to get, with all this talk about, regulations and guidelines, it's easy to get kind of lost in the weeds, right? But I think it's important to remember why we're doing this, right? Like, what is the ultimate goal? What is the big picture here?
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, this is about improving lives, alleviating suffering,
Yeah.
empowering individuals to heal and to thrive. And that should be the driving force behind all of this research, all of this effort. We can't lose sight of that.
Right. It's about, remembering the human element.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think, that brings us back to those core concepts.
Yes.
Like those are the safeguards. That's what ensures that we're proceeding with both innovation and integrity. We're not just throwing caution to the wind and just doing whatever we want, willy-nilly. We're actually being very careful. We're being very deliberate. We're doing this in a way that is responsible and that is ethical.
And that is sustainable, right? Because I think that's another key piece of this. We can't just have a flash in the pan where, there's all this excitement and then it all fizzles out.
Right.
We need to create something that is lasting, that can really, have a long-term impact on mental health care and on society as a whole.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, one thing that I thought was really interesting, and maybe this is a good place to kind of dig into a little bit deeper. We were talking about, MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD and the recent FDA decision. And I was kind of surprised by the FDA's, sort of rejection of expanded access.
Mm-hmm.
But it also kind of made me realize, how carefully they're weighing the evidence, even when there's this immense pressure to expedite the process.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really important point. And it's a great example of those competing priorities that are at play here.
Right.
On the one hand, we have this incredible potential, these therapies that are showing so much promise for treating these really debilitating conditions. And there's this understandable desire to make them available as quickly as possible, to get them to the people who need them. But on the other hand, we also have to uphold these rigorous standards, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to make sure that these therapies are safe, that they're effective, that we're not just, rushing things through without doing our due diligence. And I think the FDA, their cautious approach, it really underscores the importance of those core concepts that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
It's not about saying no to innovation, right? It's about ensuring that those innovations are built on a solid foundation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they're grounded in evidence, in safety, and in ethical considerations.
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of about finding that middle ground, right? Like moving forward with a sense of urgency, but also acknowledging that we need to do this right. We need to be meticulous. We need to be thorough, and we need to be responsible.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. Yeah, it's finding that balance. It's a dance, right?
Yeah.
But it's a dance that we need to learn how to do, because if we want to see these therapies reach their full potential, and if we want to see them, benefit the people who need them most, then we have to find that sweet spot. We have to find that balance between moving forward with a sense of purpose and urgency, but also doing it in a way that is responsible and ethical.
Okay, so and speaking of finding that balance, I mean, one of the things that really stood out to me as we were exploring all this stuff was the importance of set and setting.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the mindset, the intention, the environment, all of that stuff. Like how do we actually, I mean, that's a very kind of abstract concept in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So how do we actually translate that into practice? Like how do therapists actually, create that optimal set and setting for these experiences?
Well, I think it starts with creating a safe and supportive space.
Oh, Reagan.
And that's both physically and emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
The therapeutic setting itself, can be carefully curated.
Mm-hmm.
You think about calming music, comfortable furnishings, soft lighting. I mean, it's really about creating a sanctuary, a space where individuals can feel safe enough to let go of their defenses and to really dive deep into the inner workings of their minds. And beyond the physical environment, I mean, there are specific techniques that therapists use to help individuals prepare for the experience. To set intentions, to process the emotions and the insights that arise during the session.
Right.
So it's really about creating that holistic container, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about taking the substance. It's about creating a space where individuals can feel supported, understood, empowered to navigate the challenges and the opportunities that arise during these experiences.
Right. Yeah. So it's really an art as much as it is a science.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's about, that's where the art of therapy meets the science of psychedelic medicine.
I love that.
It's really about recognizing that these substances they're powerful tools.
They are.
They need to be handled with care,
Yeah.
with sensitivity,
Yeah.
and with a deep understanding of the human psyche.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's something that sometimes gets lost in the hype, right? The excitement around these therapies. It's easy to forget that these are powerful tools that can be used for good or for ill,
Mm-hmm.
and it's up to us to make sure that they're being used responsibly.
Right, right. Okay, so we've talked about set and setting, and we've talked about the importance of the therapist and creating that container. One of the things that really kind of blew my mind as we were
Yeah.
going through all this was this concept of the default mode network, or the DMN.
Yeah.
And it's like we have this sort of like autopilot in our brains.
We do.
That's constantly churning away. And psychedelics seem to have this unique ability to kind of disrupt that. Like how does that actually work, and what are the implications of that?
Well, I mean, it is fascinating, isn't it? I mean, the default mode network, it's this network of brain regions that's active when we're, kind of lost in thought, when we're ruminating about the past, when we're worrying about the future. It's that kind of that voice in our head
Yeah.
that's constantly chattering away.
Yeah.
And what was remarkable is that psychedelics, and particularly psilocybin, have been shown to really quiet down the default mode network, leading to these experiences of ego dissolution and a sense of interconnectedness. And that disruption of the default mode network has been linked to some of the therapeutic effects that we see in studies using psilocybin for depression and anxiety. So it's really quite remarkable what these substances are doing at a neurological level. They're not just, targeting specific receptors. They're actually influencing the way our minds operate.
Yeah. And it kind of makes sense, right? Because if you think about, a lot of mental health conditions, I mean, they're characterized by this kind of like rigid thinking.
Yeah.
This inability to kind of get out of your own head, right?
Yeah.
And so if you can somehow disrupt that, if you can somehow, kind of shake things up a little bit, that maybe that can create space for new perspectives, for new ways of thinking, for new possibilities.
Yeah. And it's not just about, those specific conditions, right? I mean, I think there are implications for creativity, for problem solving, for spiritual growth. I mean, it's really quite profound when you start thinking about the potential impact of being able to kind of to quiet that inner critic, to step outside of our habitual patterns of thought and to see things from a fresh perspective.
Yeah. Okay. So we're kind of getting into some pretty deep territory here.
Yeah.
We're talking about the nature of consciousness. We're talking about, the self, all these really kind of big questions. And I think that's one of the things that makes this field so fascinating, right? Is that it's not just about, developing new drugs.
Right.
It's really about, exploring the human experience, the mysteries of the mind.
Absolutely. It's about understanding what it means to be human.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what makes it so compelling. I mean, at least for me, that's what really kind of draws me to this work, is that it's not just about, the nuts and bolts of science. It's really about these big questions.
It's about the big questions. And I think, these substances, these glimpses into altered states of consciousness, they offer us a unique opportunity to explore those questions. They challenge our assumptions about reality, about who we are, about what's possible. And I think in that challenge, there's tremendous potential for growth, for healing, for transformation. So it's a journey, right? It's an exploration, and it's one that I think is worth taking.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I mean that was pretty pretty deep stuff.
We went there.
We did go there. But, before we get too philosophical,
Yeah.
There's more ground to cover.
There is. We've got to bring it back down to earth a little bit.
Yeah, we do. So, we'll take a break here, and then we'll come back and we'll continue our deep dive.
Sounds good.
Okay.
See you soon.
See you soon.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Before the break, we were talking about the human side of all this.
Yeah, the human element. Seems like it always comes back to that.
It really does. And that brings us to another fascinating aspect. How this research is changing how we think about the brain, consciousness even. We talked about the default mode network. But there's so much more to uncover.
Oh, I'm all ears. What other secrets are these therapies revealing about how our brains work?
Well, one thing is the incredible plasticity of the brain.
Plasticity.
Yeah, its ability to adapt, to rewire itself based on experiences. It's not this fixed thing, it's dynamic, always changing.
So not just about targeting one specific area,
Yeah.
but almost like influencing how flexible, how adaptable the brain can be overall.
Precisely. And that's huge GE for treating so many conditions. I mean, depression, anxiety, addiction, even neurodegenerative diseases.
Wow. Opens up a whole new world of possibilities, doesn't it?
It does. And honestly, we're just scratching the surface. There's so much more to learn.
Well, I got to ask then, what research are you most excited about right now? What's really catching your eye?
One thing that's really intriguing is neurogenesis. Have you heard of that?
What now?
Neurogenesis, the growth of new brain cells.
Oh, wow. So not just repairing damage, but actually growing new cells.
Exactly. Some studies suggest psychedelics, especially psilocybin, might stimulate this, especially in the hippocampus, the part of the brain that's crucial for memory and learning.
So potential to actually regenerate brain tissue. That's incredible.
It is incredible. Think about it. Treating depression, anxiety, even Alzheimer's. If we can harness this power to regrow those cells, enhance how we think.
Like unlocking a whole new level of healing, not just for the mind, but for the physical brain itself.
Exactly. That's what makes this field so exhilarating. We're pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible.
Absolutely. I mean, it feels like we're on the edge of a whole new kind of medicine, doesn't it?
Yeah.
One that embraces the mind's power, understands how our bodies and the world around us are connected.
I love that. And it's not just within science. Society's changing, too. People are realizing mental health, IS health. We need more options, more ways to help people.
Yeah, it's like we're finally moving past that old stigma around mental health, taking a more holistic approach to well-being.
Exactly. And that shift is making room for these new therapies, allowing them to be studied seriously with the respect they deserve.
Makes me think about all those FDA pathways we discussed, all those strict protocols. It can't be easy doing research in a field that's been so misunderstood for so long.
Yeah.
How do you even design studies that are scientifically rigorous and overcome those old biases, those misconceptions?
Such an important question. It really highlights the ethical side of this research. We have to be so mindful of bias.
Bias.
Yeah, and how we design studies, how we interpret the results, even our own preconceived notions about these substances, what they do, it all plays a role.
It's like walking a tightrope, isn't it?
All
That cultural baggage, societal expectations. We have to be cautious, open, objective.
Absolutely. And that means talking to the public, honestly, openly, addressing their concerns, busting those myths. Good science communication is key.
Yeah, making those complex findings understandable, relatable, sharing the stories behind the data.
That's it. The stories of the people whose lives are changed by these therapies, the scientists making the discoveries, the clinicians working directly with patients.
It's about building trust, helping people understand, creating a space for honest conversations about these substances.
And those conversations need to go beyond the lab, beyond the clinic. They need to include policymakers, regulators, the public, everyone.
So it's a team effort. Scientists, clinicians, policymakers, the public, all working together. Only then can we create the right environment for these therapies to truly thrive.
That's right. Because at the end of the day, the future of these therapies depends on public acceptance. People need to see them not as dangerous drugs, but as potential tools for healing, for personal growth.
It's about changing the whole narrative, moving away from fear and stigma towards curiosity and compassion.
And that change is happening, thanks to researchers, advocates, and people sharing their own experiences.
It's powerful hearing those stories firsthand. Really puts a human face on all the science.
It does. And that collective voice, all those different perspectives, are crucial for building a future where these therapies are part of mainstream healthcare. But it has to be done safely, responsibly, and fairly.
Speaking of fairness, access.
Yeah.
That's something I keep thinking about. If these therapies do become more widely available, how do we make sure they're not just for the wealthy, the privileged?
Such a crucial point. We have to fight for mental health care that's affordable and accessible for everyone. No one should be denied potentially life-changing treatment because of cost.
So it goes beyond the research, beyond the lab. We need to tackle those systemic issues, push for policy changes.
Absolutely. Mental health is a human right. Everyone deserves the best possible care, regardless of their income, their background, no exceptions.
Going through those research articles, one thing that really struck me was the level of detail. The statistical analysis, the control groups, how carefully they worded their conclusions. It's a reminder that science is a process, and it's not always fast.
It's true. Science takes patience, humility. It means accepting that we don't have all the answers, that we're constantly learning and refining our understanding.
Like exploring a vast, uncharted territory. We have our scientific tools to guide us, but there are always going to be surprises, challenges along the way.
And that's what makes it so exciting, that spirit of exploration, of discovery, pushing the boundaries of knowledge, revealing the incredible potential of the human mind.
Okay, we've talked a lot about the science, the potential benefits. But I'm curious about the bigger picture, the philosophical implications. What do these altered states of consciousness, these experiences of ego dissolution, tell us about reality, about who we are, our place in the universe?
Now we're getting into metaphysics. It's a realm that's fascinated people for centuries. These substances, these glimpses into other states of consciousness, they raise big questions about the nature of reality, the boundaries of the self, the interconnectedness of everything.
It's like peeking behind the curtain of our everyday perceptions, isn't it?
Yeah.
Questioning everything we thought we knew about ourselves and the world.
Exactly. And while it can be unsettling, it can also be incredibly liberating. It pushes us to expand our horizons, to see ourselves and the universe in a new light, to recognize that we are all connected.
It's like rediscovering ancient wisdom.
Fine.
We're not isolated individuals, but part of something much larger, a vast web of life.
A beautiful way to put it. It's both humbling and empowering. It reminds us that we're not just watching the world go by, we're actively shaping it. And that's a responsibility we can't take lightly.
As we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm just amazed by how much ground we've covered. From the tiny molecules and receptors to these vast philosophical questions, it's been quite a journey.
It really has. We've gone deep into drug development, regulations, scientific methods, and the complex interplay of biology, psychology, the human experience.
And it's clear that we've only just begun to scratch the surface.
Yeah.
This field is evolving so quickly, with new discoveries all the time.
And it requires constant attention, careful thought, and a commitment to ethical research. We need to move forward with both excitement and caution, to embrace the potential of these therapies, but always respect their power and the complexities involved.
It has to be a collaborative effort. Scientists, clinicians, regulators, policymakers, the public, everyone working together to navigate this new frontier responsibly.
And at the heart of it all are real people whose lives can be transformed by these therapies. That's what drives us. To alleviate suffering, to promote healing, to empower individuals to live better, more fulfilling lives. That's a mission worth fighting for.
It's like we're all weaving this grand tapestry together. Science, compassion, human potential. And each of us has a part to play in shaping the future of this field, making sure these therapies are used wisely and ethically.
Beautifully said. We'll take a short break now, but we'll be back soon for the final part of our deep dive. Stay with us.
And we are back for the final part of our deep dive into cannabinoid and psychedelic therapies. It's hard to believe this is our last segment.
It's flown by, hasn't it? But like you said before the break, this isn't the end of the conversation. It feels like we've just opened the door to so many more questions.
Exactly. It's like with every answer, 10 more questions pop up. But that's what I love about science. It's a constant process of discovery.
Absolutely. And it's those new questions that keep pushing us forward. Speaking of which, I want to go back to something we touched on earlier, the human element in all of this. I talk about regulations, the science, ethics. But behind it all are real people who are passionate about this work.
It's easy to get lost in the data and the technical details, but it's those passionate individuals, the researchers, clinicians, the patients, they're the ones driving this whole field forward.
You got it. Their dedication, their willingness to think differently, to challenge the old ways, that's what's fueling this incredible wave of innovation.
When we were discussing MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD, I was really moved by the stories of both the researchers and the participants. They're stepping into the unknown, pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible in mental health care.
It's inspiring, isn't it, to see that level of commitment, that belief in the power of these therapies to heal and change lives?
And it's not just limited to PTSD either. We've seen promising research on psychedelics for so many conditions. Depression, anxiety, addiction, even cluster headaches. It feels like a whole new frontier in medicine is opening up.
It is a new frontier, and as we continue to explore it, we have to keep those core concepts in mind. Quality by design, risk management, ethical considerations. Those principles are going to make sure we do this right, that we protect individuals and society as a whole.
And on that note, we focus a lot on FDA-approved therapies. But there's also the unregulated market, where all kinds of products make claims without the same level of scrutiny. It can feel like the Wild West out there.
It can be tricky. That's why it's so important for people to educate themselves. Just because a product is labeled natural or hemp-derived doesn't mean it's automatically safe or effective. We need to be smart consumers, to ask the right questions. Where did this come from? How was it made? Was it tested properly?
It's like sorting through a mountain of information, trying to separate the truth from the hype.
And that's where those core concepts we've been emphasizing become even more crucial. Quality by design, risk management, testing. We need to demand transparency from manufacturers, push for stronger regulations, and educate ourselves so we can make informed decisions about what we use.
You know, thinking about the future of this field, it's hard not to be optimistic. There's so much potential for cannabinoid and psychedelic therapies to revolutionize how we approach mental health, to even change how we understand what it means to be human.
I agree. What's most exciting is how this research is challenging everything we thought we knew about the brain, about consciousness, about how healing works. It's opening doors to new treatments, new paths for personal growth, and ultimately, I think, a more compassionate and interconnected world.
It feels like we're part of a major shift happening, a move towards a more holistic way of thinking about healthcare, one that embraces the power of the mind and the potential for real, lasting change.
It's a shift that needs all of us, scientists, clinicians, policymakers, advocates, anyone who's passionate about exploring consciousness and unlocking that potential for healing and well-being.
And it's a shift that's gaining momentum. We're seeing more research, more funding, more awareness. People are recognizing that we need new solutions for mental health challenges.
It's an exciting time to be involved in this field, and as we move forward, we need to find that balance, the enthusiasm for the potential, but also the caution and responsibility needed to navigate the complexities.
Speaking of navigating responsibly, we talked a lot about set and setting, the importance of the right mindset and environment for these experiences. I'm curious, how does that actually translate to the clinical setting? What's being done to make sure these therapies are delivered safely and with the right support?
That's a great question, and something researchers and clinicians are very focused on. As these therapies are developed, best practices for how to use them are being developed right alongside them.
So it's not just about the substance itself, but creating the right context, the right environment for the experience.
Exactly. It's recognizing that these substances are powerful tools, and they need to be used carefully, with sensitivity and a deep understanding of the human mind. That means creating a therapeutic space that feels safe, supportive, and promotes healing.
Can you give me an example of what that looks like in a real session?
Sure. It starts with careful screening to make sure a person is a good fit for these therapies. Then there's a lot of preparation, multiple sessions with trained therapists to build rapport, trust, talk about intentions, and what challenges might come up.
So it's not as simple as just showing up and taking something.
Yeah.
It's a whole process, carefully planned, to make sure it has the best possible therapeutic outcome.
Exactly. And during the actual session, the therapist is there the whole time, offering guidance and support, helping the person navigate the experience and process whatever emotions or insights come up.
It sounds like the therapist is really acting as a guide, helping the person make sense of what they're experiencing and integrate it into their life afterward.
You got it. The therapist is there to hold space, to create that safe container for the person to really explore their own inner world.
And that integration process, I imagine, is just as important as the session itself.
It is. It's not just about having a profound experience, but what happens afterward, how those insights, those shifts in perspective become part of everyday life.
So it's a journey that continues long after the therapy session is over.
Right. And that's where the real transformation takes place, when those insights start to influence relationships, behaviors, overall well-being.
Listening to you talk about all of this, it's amazing. It really feels like we're at the start of something completely new in how we understand the mind, the brain, and the potential for healing.
I feel it too. It's an honor to be part of this, to see science, spirituality, and human potential all coming together.
It's a reminder that there's so much more to learn, so much to explore, and these therapies have the potential to change the world for the better.
They do. And it's going to take all of us working together, being open-minded, and embracing the unknown to make sure that happens responsibly.
Well said. This has been an incredible 30 days, exploring the world of cannabinoid and psychedelic therapies with you. We've covered the science, the potential, the challenges, the possibilities.
And we've seen how this field is pushing us to rethink everything we thought we knew about the mind, the brain, and what it means to heal. But most importantly, we've seen the dedication and compassion of the people who are doing this work and the people whose lives are being changed by it.
It's been a privilege to share this journey with all of you. And we encourage you to keep exploring, keep asking questions, and stay engaged with this incredible field.
The future of cannabinoid and psychedelic therapies is bright, and it's being shaped by passionate people like you who are curious and want to make a difference.
So stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.
The journey of discovery is just beginning.
Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive. Until next time, keep diving deep.